Okay, in this video tutorial, I'm going to talk about how to create a more complex iRig in Toonboom. So in the last video tutorial, I went over a simple iRig in Toonboom using kind of what I call a drawbridge eye technique. And so this is a little more advanced. And so in this rig, we are going to be able to move the eye like this, change these settings with deformers, and then we'll be able to move the pupil in the iris and have it masked off like that. And then finally, we can do things like dilate the eye, for like a surprise look, a bunch of stuff like that. So if you have an eye that needs to get masked off by the outer edges like this, then this will be a good video tutorial to help you with that. So to get started, I'm just going to delete all this stuff and we will start from scratch. So I'm going to start off in terms of the color palette. I recommend that you go ahead and create your own color palette based off of your concept art. So you just, under color, you press under palettes, press this button, start to create your own palette and generate a palette from that. Since this is just an online demo, I'm just going to use the colors that are, available to me right now below. Okay, so with the black line, I'm going to go ahead and start creating some drawing layers. And so to plan this out, I'll just hold down plus, go down to drawing. I'm going to use vector. You can see that I'm using the 4 art layers for each drawing layer, and I'll show in just a moment how you can set that up. So here I'm just going to call this eye for the main eye, and I'll just add a few drawing layers while I'm here. So I'm going to create the pupil, and then the iris, oops, and I will go ahead and add the specular highlight. You might not have a specular highlight in yours, and so if that's the case, you don't need to add this one, and then I'll just add and close on this. Okay, and so as promised, I was going to say how you can get these 4 art layers. So normally you just have line art, color art. So this is line art, color art, underlay, and then overlay art layers. And there's a reason that I'll have this set up. And that might come, you might not end up needing it, but you might need it for this. So it just, it might be good just to go ahead and do this. And so to turn that on, you just go to Harmony, Preferences, and under Advanced, so you have these different tabs up here. And under Advanced, just turn on Support Overlay and Underlay Arts, and you'll have that turned on. Okay, and so next, I'm just going to start with the outer eye, and you can draw this using whatever method you want. In this instance, I'm going to use the line tool, and I will just, using the line tool, you can click and drag like this using the line tool. Things that I suggest is when you're using the line tool, the pencil tool that you select before it will help you kind of determine what settings that it has. So for instance, if I'm using a pencil tool that has a whole lot of texture to it, when I use the line tool afterwards, it'll have that same texture. So with the pencil tool, just kind of, if you do what I'm doing here, find a pencil that you like. I'm just going to go for something that's a little more graphic and clean. And when using the line tool, I like to have this button turned on. So under Tool Properties, having the magnet turned on. To follow my tutorial, you don't need to use the line tool. You can use the brush tool, pencil tool, it doesn't matter. So using the line tool, I just click and drag, and then before I let go, I can hold Control on a Mac, Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, and you can curve the line. So I'm continuing to hold down my mouse, and you can draw a line like that. So again, just click, drag, I'm still holding down, and on a Mac, I'm holding Command down now. So I haven't let go of my mouse, and I'm holding down Command, and I can curve the line just like that. And when the magnet's turned on, it'll snap to edges, which is really helpful. So click and drag, Command, click and drag, it'll snap, Command, and you can kind of begin to choose your shape this way. Remember the contour editor under here, the white selection, you can go in and change the way these are lined up a little bit if you want to, change the proportions depending on your character design. And so using the contour editor, we got the anchor point, and then we have these Bezier handles. And so if you've used Adobe Illustrator, this will seem really familiar to you. Using the contour editor, I can also hold down let's see here. Oops, I can hold down Option on a Mac, Alt on a PC, and you can break the handles like that if you need to. So you can adjust this a lot after the fact. Okay, so I've got the outer eye right there, and I'm going to go ahead and move to the pupil. So I'll just go and create with the ellipse tool on that. Notice that I'm drawing on my line art layer, by the way. So I've got my pupil, and then I'm going to go to my iris art layer, click and drag that, and I'm just holding Shift so that it comes out as a circle. And again, remember, you can use your pencil tool or your brush tool for this. When you're placing these, you can also use your direction arrows to fine tune some of the placement of these. And I'm not going to get this totally perfect because, you know, I don't want to make y'all sit here and wait while I get this perfectly lined up. And then the specular highlight I'm going to save for later. Okay, so now that I have the line art, let's copy line art down to color art. And so I'll turn off the visibility of these so this is kind of clear what I'm doing. So for the outer eye, with my select tool right there, I'm going to drag and select the whole thing. And you're looking for this button right here. So it's create color art from line art. And so we're going to copy the strokes from this line art down to the color art. And this is super, super important that you do this in order to follow along with this tutorial. So again, if you're working in bitmap, you're not going to be able to do this. So be sure you're working in vector, and just draw your line art on this line art layer, and then we're going to copy it down. So I'm selecting it. I'm pressing this button to copy the line art down to the color art. And so now when I click on the color art, you'll see there's this blue line that shows up. So that's called a stroke that is copied down from the line art. And so now, I'll fill in the white of the eye right here. And I'll just use the paint bucket tool. And so for anyone who's unfamiliar with this process, if I go to this drawing tab, so normally I'm working in the camera tab right here, but if I go to the drawing tab, and this is light gray, I can isolate each art layer. So this is what the color art's doing, that's what the line art's doing. So color art, line art. All right, so I'll move back to the camera view. All right, so next up, let's create the pupil. So same process, I'm gonna use the select tool, make sure the right layer is selected. And we're looking for this button. So I'm gonna copy the line art down to the color art. I'll give this person blue eyes and paint bucket it in. And then finally, the iris. I'm gonna select that, oops. And again, make sure I'm on the right art layer and then the right drawing layer down here. Select the line art, copy down to the color art, and then I'm just going to use a black color for this. And now when we turn on the visibility for all three of these, it looks like that. And now we are ready to go into the node view. So the node view you can find over here. If you don't see the node view, you can hold down plus in any of these panels. So you see how there's an X and a plus. So I can hold down plus and go to node view. So not node library, but node view. And you could also, if you want to, you can go to Windows and find the node view right there. And so it looks like this at first. And so to declutter this, you can manually move these into place, or you can drag and select all of them and then press one of these three buttons. And that'll just kind of arrange it for you. I like to do that just to get started. And I'm a little OCD, so I like to arrange it even after the fact. Okay, so on the outer eye, we're going to focus on this one first. And so what we need to do is we need to make it so that when I move the iris and the pupil, right now if I were to move those two things, let's say I'm going to just move the iris for a minute, you can see it goes outside of the eye. We need to mask that off right there. So there's a couple of things we need to do in order to set that up. So under this eye node, which again is, you can see it's selected right here, is the outer eye. I'll go ahead and change the name right here. I'll call this outer underscore eye so that that's a little more clear. And I'm going to create some nodes down here. So to create nodes, you can look through the node library, which you can find down here, or you can just, what I do is just click in the empty area, click return or enter on your keyboard, and then I'm going to look for two nodes. So the first node is called line art isolate, and you can just begin to type it in and it'll show up. So line art isolate, and then color art isolate. So we're going to isolate those two components. So click right here, return, and then I'm going to do color art. And you can see there's a few options, but you can see color art isolate about 4 down, and I'll click right there. So we're going to now plug these in. So there's two ways you can plug nodes in to a network, and I'll show you both ways. So the first way I'll do with the line art is I'll hold down Option on a Mac, Alt on a PC, and either just click it and drag it until it snaps into the node network. And so now you can see into the composite node, which is just the node that visually groups things together. And in this case, this composite node is sending to the display, so that's why we can see it. So the line art is plugged in, but the color art is not. So did you see how the color art disappeared? So I'll remove this node just to show that. I'll hold Option and click off of it. And so now they're both showing up because neither of these isolate nodes aren't being used. If I want to isolate the line art, I just hold down Option, click it and drag it. So now the line art's being isolated. And I want to bring the color art to the party here. So the other way you can plug that in is just manually by clicking on this little blue box under the outer eye, drag into the color art, and then drag the color art into the composite node. So one thing that's going to be really relevant coming up here is the composite node works where the thing that's furthest to the left on the composite node, so in this case it's the specular highlight, which is not visible, is going to show up on top. Whatever's plugged in on the very right of the composite node is going to show up on the bottom. And oh yeah, one other trick here is these nodes show you what drawing layers are enabled or disabled. So you can enable and disable layers by clicking on these eye icons in the timeline. You can also press A to enable in the node view. So A to enable, D to disable right there. So that can be a helpful shortcut just to quickly turn on and off layers while you're in the node view. All right, and so next up, what we need to do is we need to create masking nodes to make the mask work. And so remember what I was saying about the iris, when we have it come to the outside, it needs to get masked off. And so the plan here is we're going to take the color art from the outer eye and use that as our mask. And what masking nodes are called in Harmony is called a cutter node. And so I'm just going to click a search. So click in an empty area, return, and start typing in cutter. So it's called cutter combine. And I'm just going to create two of these. So again, just return, run a search. And I'll move this one off to the side. So don't worry about that one that I dragged off to the side. Oops, let's see. Okay, so the way the cutter node works is the node that's being plugged into it, so the pupil, this blue area of the eye, we want that to get masked off by the outer eye. And so the drawing layer that's getting cut is going to get plugged down the middle of the cutter node. And then the drawing layer that's doing the cutting is going to go into the mask. And you see it's indicated by a little mask node right there. So I'm going to plug this in. So I'm going to hold Option or Alt and then drag that into that space. So it's not going to do anything yet. And then next, I'm going to plug the masking part of the cutter node into the thing I want to do the masking. So I'm going to plug that into the color. And you can see the blue area just disappeared entirely. And so that's going to happen to you. And so all you need to do is just double tap on this little mask icon, and it's going to invert the mask. So basically what it was doing, so let me just move this pupil real quick to the outer edge. And so what it was doing at first is it was masking it that way, where the eye was deleting the pupil, and we want it to be the other way around. So I'm just going to double click like that. Okay, and let me just organize this just a little further. I like things to kind of be nice and level. All right, so this other cutter, I'm going to do the exact same thing to the iris. So this is the exact same step. So remember, you can plug this in manually, or you can hold Alt or Option. So I'll do the manual one just so you can see that one again. So I'm going to click that into the cutter node, and then bring the cutter node into the composite. And then this is going to be the exact same thing. We're going to bring the masking part of the cutter node into the color art. So I'm just going to click above the mask, drag it into the color art, and then I need to double click it to invert the mask. And so now this thing is set up correctly here. Next up, a lot of the work's been done at this point. So next up, we need to create a deformer for the outer eye. And I have a video tutorial that goes over deformers in length. And so it's good to know all of them and kind of get used to them. I'm going to do one of the quicker options for the deformer. But again, that's worth a deep dive if you're unfamiliar with them. And so a deformer is a way that you can take a drawing layer and just kind of distort it and move it around in different ways. And so you're clicking on the drawing layer that you want to deform, and then you look up here to the wrench and hammer, and then these are your sets of deformers right there. And so normally for this eye, I would do the envelope mode. I think that's the one I would recommend for most people. For this video tutorial, I'm just going to use a different thing, which is, or another way of doing that, which is kind of the automatic deformer, where you click on the drawing layer. I'm going to go up to the top where it says animation, envelope creator, create envelope. And under this, you're basically setting it up. So I'm not going to go into detail about all these sliders do, but the most important one I think is the top one, which is the number of deformation points. The problem that we'll find with this automatic envelope creator is this is like the quick way to do it, but you don't always want to do it this way because you can't control where your anchor point is going to land using this method. So, just keep that in mind. And on this one, I want this to be a really simple envelope. So I'm just going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 deformers on it, or deforming points. And use with all corners as something to turn on if you have like a square object. So if you have like square eyes, maybe you want to use that one, but this is a roundish eye. And so I'll create an envelope, and you can see the deformer gets created over there. And to test out an envelope, I'm going to turn animate current frame off. So look for the yellow stick figure, turn it to a red stick figure. And then underneath this is the transform tool, and this is how you move your deformers around. And I'll click off. And so that deformer created like this, nicely done at the top, nicely done at the bottom. I have these nice hard edges right here on the sides. And this is pretty much how I would have drawn it with my, if I was drawing it manually. So this came out pretty well. So we have a deformer here, and so this is really useful to add expressions to the eye. So that step is good to go. Next up, I'm just on this outer eye, I'm going to do one more thing, which is I'm going to just create a peg for the outer eye. So with the deformer selected, I'm just going to press Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, and then P for peg, and that creates a peg that's automatically attached to it. Whenever I create a peg, I just click on this yellow box that's right here, and I change it from 3D path to separate. Look what happens down here when I do that. So you can see it kind of simplifies the controls a little bit, and that is a good thing. And all right, so next up, we have the iris and the pupil. I want to have each of these to have their own peg for the iris and the pupil, and then I want a primary peg that I can move the pupil, the iris, and perhaps even the specular highlight. I need to think about that one for another minute. So we're going to go through the same process we just did for the deformer. With the pupil, I'm just going to select on the pupil drawing, press Command or Control and then P, and that creates a peg. On this one, I'm going to click on the yellow box, the properties box, and change it to separate. And one step that I forgot for the overall eye is when I create a peg, we need to set the anchor point. And so to change the anchor point on a peg, so you can see I have the peg selected right here. The anchor point's over there. And so to change the anchor point, you would think it's this button, because that's how you change the anchor point on a drawing layer. But instead, you want to change the anchor point by clicking on this button for a peg. So with the peg selected, I'm going to click on this button up here. It's a dual use button. And so if you click in the middle, you can change the anchor point of the peg. And if you click on the outside out here, it'll rotate the peg. So I'll press Edit Undo. And I just want that to be right in the middle. All right, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the iris. Yep, okay, so for the iris, I'm going to select that drawing. I'm going to press Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, and then P for peg. I'm going to click on the properties box, change it to separate. And, normally I would rename these, right? But I'm just trying to keep this quick for the video tutorial. And same thing is this button up here. I'm going to change the anchor point. So again, just drag that into the middle. And so having two different pegs for this is really helpful, because on the iris, I can go back down to this transform button, which is how you're going to animate all this stuff. And I can dilate the eyes or expand the eyes, right, or the iris. I'm just realizing now I got the pupil and the iris mixed up, so forgive me on that. So this technically is the pupil, that's the iris, so that's going to be confusing for people who know that information. So I can expand this one as well. And finally, for this peg that goes for the outer eye, I need to set that anchor point as well for that peg. So same thing, this button over here. Let's say that this is their right eye, and so I might put the peg right there. Next up, so I have a peg for the pupil and the iris, and again, I swapped those names by mistake, but if I want to move them both at the same time, what you're going to want to do is you need to select both of these pegs and create a peg for that. So I'm just going to drag and select these pegs, and then press Command P, and that'll create one peg that controls both of those. And so now same thing, yellow properties box separate, change the anchor point. So I've already got the button selected, move that to over here. And so now if I go to the transform and I have this peg selected, I can move the eye and it'll get masked off by the outer eye, and I can move both of those at the same time using that peg. One thing too that I think is really helpful is with the pegs, under this transform tool, I like to have this button right here enabled, and so that goes to peg selection mode. So I just recommend turning that on. That'll kind of help you during the animation process, because you really want to, when it's time to animate, you really want to avoid animating your drawing layers, and you really want to animate on your pegs. And take note as well that when I select a peg, look in this canvas space. So this is the outer eye. So when I select that outer eye peg, this kind of warmer color, and then when I select the drawing, it's going to go more purple right there. So if you make selections then they look purple, that means that you're animating on the wrong drawing layer. Okay, and so finally I have, there's one more step right here, and then I'm going to, at the end of this video tutorial, I'm going to show an extra advanced technique that you can do to kind of make this go from a great to perfect here, is with the Specular Highlight, I can enable that layer. So remember that is A is the shortcut for that, and I haven't painted it yet. So I'll draw this on my line art layer, and I'm just going to create a white area, and I'll just use my brush. Never mind, I'm going to use the ellipse tool. And instead of doing the copy art down the line art down to the color art, I'm just going to paint bucket in right on the line art, because this is a very simple layer. And so if I want extra control over this, I'll go back to the node view. I'm going to press Command P or Control P, add a peg to it, yellow properties box separate. And then same thing as before, change the anchor point. So click up here, click in the middle. I can change the anchor point right there. And you'll notice that I need another cutter node to mask this. So I'm going to just do the same steps I had done before, where I click in this empty area, press return, and then cutter. I can hold Option on a Mac, Alt on a PC, and click and drag to snap it in there. And then click on the mask above the mask, and then drag that into the color art. And then finally, you can see it disappears. That's because I need to invert the mask. So you just double click on the little mask icon, and now it's back in business. And I kind of want this to move with the outer eye, I think. So I have a Specular Highlight control, and then if the Specular Highlight moves, then I want it to kind of move with the whole eye. So I'm going to drag this up a level, and then I'm just going to create a primary peg for all these. So I'm just going to drag and select the whole thing, press Command or Control, and then P. And so this is a peg that'll be for the whole eye. And again, just repeating the steps, yellow property box separate, and then click on this button, change the anchor point. And so now, now if I want to change the overall eye, I have this control. And by the way, when you use this transform tool, wait for the 4 arrows to show up on your cursor. If there's just not 4 arrows, I'm going to click and it's not going to do anything. But if I click on the peg and I see those 4 arrows with the transform tool selected, I can move the whole eye around. And so now I can move the Specular Highlight, I can move the eye, and it gets masked off right there. I can deform the eye, so I click off of that, and so you can see the Specular Highlights gets cut off. And so we could be done here. There's one more step I want to show here, and so you'll notice that this eye, when I bring it down to this point, it starts to get a little funky on us. And so this is the last technique that I'm going to show in this video tutorial. So I'm going to press Command Z. And so this is where these 4 art layers come in. So you remember I brought that up at the beginning of the tutorial, so we're going to tie that back in. And so this is something that's good to do at this stage. I'm going to go ahead and save my scene so that I don't lose my work in case something crashes. Okay, so in order to do this, we have to do steps in a sequence. And I've actually made a video tutorial already that's called Broken Deformers that goes over this specific technique. So I could just refer y'all to that video tutorial, but I'm going to be extra diligent here and just kind of include it at the end of this video tutorial. So you need to kind of follow these steps in the same order I'm about to do here. So for the outer eye, we have the peg, we have the deformer, and then we have the drawing. And so on the drawing, I'm on the drawing layer, and then I'm going to go to the line art layer. And then under color, I'm just going to use my black pencil my black line for the outer edge that I'm about to draw. But I did create a new color that's just kind of a throwaway color that I made like a bright fuchsia. And I just called it mask down here. So you can just press plus under the color palette and type in mask for this. And so on the light art layer, and the deformer is already attached to it, all that stuff, and that's fine, is I'm going to just create a rectangle, and I'm going to make it a big rectangle that goes all the way along the outside. Oops, wrong color. And I'll just make it a black outline like that. And next, I'm still on the line art layer. I'm going to go to that mask color, and I'm going to paint bucket that in. Next, I'm going to click on this black outline and delete it. So you have to click right in the right spot or else it'll delete the whole thing. So if you select it and it deletes your whole outer drawing, just press Command Z, and you might have to zoom in on it, right? So spacebar to pan, 2 to zoom in, and click right there, and then you can press delete and get a little more exact with it, 1 to zoom back out. And so now, you don't need to follow this step, but just to help illustrate, right now, if I click on this drawing panel and I isolate things, my line art layer looks like this, where I have the black line art, and then I have that purple box going around it. And the color art has that. And so what I'm going to try to do next is I'm going to copy this purple box from the line art layer down to the underlay layer. So to do that's really easy. So I just go to the select tool, select the purple box, and then you can press Command or Control and then X as in Xerox, and that cuts it. And then you can also go to Edit and find Cut down there. And then under the underlay layer, I press Command or Control and then V, and that pastes it. And so I kind of moved into this drawing panel just so you could kind of clearly see illustrated the way I have this organized now. So now the line art looks like this, color art looks like that, and then I have this underlay layer that looks just like this. And what we're essentially going to do is this purple mask, we're going to use to mask out the line art and kind of keep that distortion from happening that we were experiencing before. So I'll go back to the camera view, and I'll return to my node view over here. And so what I need to do now is on this outer eye, I need to create a underlay art layer isolate over here. So remember I isolated the line art, I isolated the color art, and now I need to isolate the that kind of underlay masking layer that I created. So I'm just going to click right here, press return, and I'm going to start typing in underlay, and you can see underlay isolate. And next I'm just going to plug the outer eye into that. So this underlay art layer is not going to get plugged back into the composite. So that's an important thing to remember right there. I'm going to instead click on this empty area, press return, and then we're going to do yet another cutter combine node. And this cutter combine node is going to go under the color art. And I'm just going to hold Option, click and drag onto that. And then this underlay art layer is going to do the masking. So I'm just going to click on that, click and drag right there. And so what this did is that purple outer area, so if I go to the drawing layer, so this purple outer area is going to mask out the color art so it doesn't do that crazy distortion on the outside. And so if I just go back to the camera view, and if I go to the outer eye deformer, which is this node right here, and go down to transform, I can click and drag, And you can see it's still messing up, but it's in the pupil and iris area. But look in this at this outer eye. You see how that's not messing up? And so what we need to do now is create new cutter nodes to go underneath these the pupil and the iris as well. So I'm just going to click return, do a second cutter combine right here, and I'm going to put this under the pupil. So I'm going to hold Option, snap that in, and then bring that all the way to the underlay layer. I'm going to do the same thing for under the iris. So click return, cutter, combine, hold Option or Alt, snap it in, drag that into the underlay. Same thing for the specular highlight. Click return, hold down Option, snap in, and then combine that with the underlay art layer. And so now, hopefully, if I click on this deformer node and then under transform, and I move that, you can see no issues no matter how much I push this thing in on itself.